At one moment in history, the gates of palaces opened to receive young women as the gates of hope itself. Luxurious garments, the scent of perfume, and promises of a life the poor could only dream of. But behind those gilded doors, not everyone ever came out again. Some women entered the palaces as guests and left them as secrets. Others never left at all. These are not legends nor dark fantasies, but stories documented in the records of empires of women whom palaces devoured, and history later denied ever existed. Before we begin, if you are a lover of dark history and the secrets never taught in school books, subscribe now to Midnight Archives. Because some stories are not meant to be heard alone. In the heart of Constantinople, the Byzantine imperial palace stood tall like a mountain of marble. A city within a city, surrounded by guards, walls, and silence. According to the Byzantine historian Procopius, dozens of young women were brought to the palace each year, in the name of imperial service. The truth was far darker. Some were chosen to serve the empress, others to serve the palace at night, and some vanished within weeks without a trace. No bodies, no death records, not even an official acknowledgement that they had ever existed. One of them was known, according to old manuscripts, as the Silent Sister, a girl from a poor Anatolian village. She entered the palace at 16 and did not leave it even after 30 years. And when an entire wing of the palace collapsed in the Great Fire of 532 AD, a skeleton of a woman was discovered behind a sealed wall, chained to the stone. She was never mentioned in any official record. No investigation was opened. The palace had swallowed her, just as it swallowed countless others. In the Ottoman Empire, the harem was the most secretive part of the palace. Hundreds of women were brought from Europe, the Caucasus, the Balkans, and Africa, and escorted into the Sultan's domain. Ottoman official documents never called them captives, but gifts. Yet the private memoirs of European diplomats reveal something entirely different. A girl entered the palace with one name and left it with another, if she ever left at all. Some names were erased after years, with only a single word written beside them: transferred. And in the language of the palace, transferred meant one of two things: either exile to the far ends of the empire, or silent death. One of the most documented incidents occurred in the 17th century, when more than 20 concubines vanished in a single night after a power struggle within the royal family. No trace of them was ever found, and days later, a decree was issued forbidding any discussion of the matter forever. In Rome, the Vestal Virgins were the symbol of sacred purity, young girls taken from their families by force to serve the goddess Vesta inside a closed temple at the empire's heart. They were told, "You are protected by the palace itself." But the truth was far harsher. If anyone suspected a Vestal of breaking her vow, she was not tried and not executed publicly. She was buried alive in an underground chamber, given a little food, and sealed away forever. Roman sources record no fewer than 18 confirmed live burials, girls who entered the palace as holy servants and left it only as bones hidden beneath the earth. In the forbidden city of Beijing, no woman was allowed to enter or leave without the emperor's permission. Thousands of concubines passed through its fortified gates over the centuries. But the imperial family records point to something chilling. The number of women who left was always far smaller than the number who went in. Some empresses were secretly executed. Some concubines were left to starve when the ruler grew angry. Others had their names erased entirely from all records. To this day, no one knows the true number of women who disappeared inside the Forbidden City, from Byzantium to Istanbul to Rome to Beijing. The same scene repeats itself. A girl enters the palace. The door closes behind her, and history erases her line by line. Palaces were not always symbols of luxury. Sometimes they were the greatest prisons humanity ever built. Prisons without visible walls, without courts, without witnesses. And here rises the question that no one dared to ask for centuries. How many women entered these palaces and were never meant to walk out? How many names, how many faces, how many voices still lie buried within marble walls, waiting for someone to return them to existence? In the second part of this story, we will uncover the real fates, names and all, of women who vanished from royal palaces across Europe and the East, in circumstances far darker and far more terrifying than you could imagine. At the dawn of the 18th century, a young noblewoman lived in Paris, Louise de la Vallière the Younger, a relative of one of King Louis XIV's mistresses. She was summoned to the Louvre Palace to serve as a lady-in-waiting, an honor no one dared refuse. She entered the palace in the spring of 1711. Months later, her name vanished from all court records. Her family asked, ambassadors whispered, but the official response remained the same. She was transferred to a secret service by order of the king. In the royal court of France, secret service usually meant one of two things: life imprisonment in a sealed convent, or an unannounced execution. 30 years later, classified documents discovered in the Versailles archives mentioned a noble girl confined in a hidden wing after learning secrets that threatened the honor of the crown. Her name was not stated, but her age, her description, the date she entered, all pointed to Louise. She entered the palace as a young woman. Her face was never seen again. In Tsarist Russia, the Winter Palace of St. Petersburg was one of Europe's most magnificent palaces and one of its darkest from within. During the reign of Empress Anna Ivanovna, a young woman from a distant branch of the royal family appeared, Ekaterina Alexeyevna the Younger. She was brought into the palace as a political marriage asset. But after only 1 year, she disappeared without any official death announcement. State documents claimed she was transferred to a convent. Yet no convent recorded her name. No grave, no marker. After the fall of the Tsarist regime, revolutionaries found the diary of a palace maid. She had written, "I saw her for the last time at night. She was crying and screaming, then dragged through a secret corridor used only by the special guards. By morning, we were told she never existed at all." In the royal Safavid court of Isfahan, the imperial harem was completely sealed from the world outside. The Italian traveler Pietro della Valle wrote in his memoirs how young girls were taken from remote villages and tribes, and how none ever returned to their families. One of the most infamous cases was that of a concubine named Mah Tabar. She entered the palace during the reign of Shah Abbas the Great. Years later, a prince accused her of conspiracy. In a single night, her name vanished, her room was washed clean, and the doors of her wing were sealed. There was no record of execution, no exile, not even death. Only, her name was removed from the royal registry. And in the language of Eastern palaces, erasing the name was the most severe form of execution. In Abbasid Baghdad, the palace on the banks of the Tigris was a world unto itself. Thousands of concubines entered through the markets, but very few ever walked out. History books recount chilling stories of women who were falsely accused or witnessed political secrets or fell victim to rivalries among princes. One of them was a young concubine named Condil. She accidentally witnessed a secret meeting between ministers. Days later, she vanished from the palace registry. No record of her being sold, no record of her dying. Only one word: absent. In the margin of an Abbasid manuscript, an anonymous scribe wrote a century later, "Whoever entered the house of the caliph with eyes that saw what they should not, left without eyes, if they left at all." In imperial China, the Forbidden City was not merely a seat of power, and it was an endless prison for women. Under the Ming dynasty, thousands of girls entered the palace as concubines. Some served for 50 years, their youth and lives consumed within the walls, never seeing the streets again. Records document the case of a concubine named Ling Xiang, who entered the palace at 13. She served 3 consecutive emperors. She died at 70, still inside the compound. Her body was not allowed to leave. She was buried inside the walls. A Chinese historian wrote, "She lived, but the world outside was dead to her." Across religions, languages, and empires, the same story repeats. The palace on the outside is gold, silk, power, glory. But beneath the surface, invisible chains, enforced silence, fates erased by command. In East and West alike, the palace was not merely a residence. It was a machine that crushed human lives quietly. Women entered the palaces without swords, but never left them, because truth was sometimes more dangerous than war. Imagine, how many names were never written? How many faces were never painted? How many voices screamed between the walls, and no one heard them? How many women entered a palace only to have their lives erased like a page removed from the royal archive? The history we know was written by men, but the history that was never written was buried with the women inside the palaces. Today, when we walk through the palaces of kings and emperors, we admire the chandeliers, gaze at the thrones, and take pictures. But we do not see the shadows that still linger in the corridors, nor do we hear the voices that suffocated behind the doors. Perhaps every stone in these palaces holds the name of a woman who entered and was never allowed to leave. And this is the question that will remain forever unanswered. Were these women victims of their era or victims of history's silence? If you believe these women deserve for their stories to be told, subscribe now to Midnight Archives, for in the Night Archive, we don't let names die in the dark.